Hello, everyone, and welcome into episode 91 of the Stomp the Bus Show. I am your host, Mark Harris, coming at you with the solo episode today. Today being August 15th, we are 16 days until the ASU season opener when they host the Wyoming Cowboys. Um, it's crazy how quick this summer has gone by and how, things are kind of really starting to get real for ASU football coming up. Really going to dive into that in future episodes. Got some good stuff in this show, though. Before we get started, please like and subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. And remember to follow the College Huddle on Twitter/X, I guess. It's at College Huddle on Twitter. And then you can go to their website, thecollegehuddle.com, to get a bunch of great content. I was on the Ryan and Rush show, which is a West Virginia fan show earlier this week. Really fun talking with those guys just about getting acclimated to the Big 12. That'll be on. You can find that on the Stop the Bus Twitter feed. Um, you know, it's funny, they were picked last in the Big 12 poll this time last year. So they know what the disrespect card that we have to deal with. So it's fun talking with them. And it's always easier to talk with an opponent if you're not playing them this year, right? Like, unless ASU makes the Big 12 championship game, they will not play West Virginia. So it's kind of interesting talking with those guys. And there's no like, when we play you on this date, it'll be interesting. It's just kind of a general Big 12 discussion. So that was a lot of fun. And yeah, let's get rolling. So the theme of this show is asking if ASU's defense can be a top half of the Big 12 unit. Um, and the reason why I'm kind of focusing in on the defense is it's just what I've read and seen from practice, that the defense has just been excellent throughout camp. Sure, you could, and it's always weird with this because it's like, if one side of the ball is doing well, then that means the other side of the ball isn't doing well. But the consistent thing has been like the defense has been good. They've been really good. It seems like there's just depth. And some of the guys they brought in late have really, Dillingham said this, and I think he was talking about some of the offensive guys as well, but how they got lucky in the post spring portal window in terms of who the guys they brought in. And he basically said that they were fed some bad information about some of these guys too. So that's interesting. But when it comes to this defense, it's just been positive news out of camp this whole time. And I listened to Speak of the Devils podcast. Highly recommend Speak of the Devils podcast, and I also recommend one of the more recent episodes where they kind of went through projecting a 22 all 22 starters. And the thing you realize when you get to this defense is just whether it's the safeties, the corners, the linebackers. You could even put defensive end. You got some good, decent defensive tackles too. Like there are on defensive line, it's one thing, but in the back seven, as it were, it just seems like they have so many bodies to go to, and not people who are just starting because you know they need to start because there's no one else, right? No, it's not that situation. And this was a guy I highlighted on two episodes ago, linebacker Keyshawn Elliott. Everything that you've heard out of camp is that this dude has just come in and been an absolute monster. He's already the guy who's going to communicate with the coaches via the in-helmet communication, which is new to college football this year. So that's cool. And I mean, again, like I highlighted on my last video two videos ago, he was so productive at New Mexico State last year. 110 tackles, 10 tackles for loss, started the whole year. And it's always tough when you get guys transferring up. But man, I mean, if he can come in and just be just a force in the linebacking crew. Like that just changes so many things. It just to have a real stopper back there. I mean, that's so big for this team. And the other linebackers, Cyrus Fiasau from San Diego State reportedly picked off a screen pass from Jeff Sims last night. You still have Caleb McCullough, who did a really good job at points last year. Jordan Crook from Arkansas is good. Tate Romney, you feel solid? You feel solid about putting him in there. And then everything we've heard about the safeties is just like you have Xavier Alford and Shamari Simmons, but then you just have depth. You have Rouser, you have Kamari Wilson. There's just guys everywhere. And it's the same with the nickel. Whether you put out Cole Martin or Mason Williams, I kind of feel fine either way, right? Mason Williams has been a good player here for, since the beginning of the Herm era, which is one of the few guys to stay through. And then the corners, the corners don't exactly have the corners are still a bit more unknown, but the way people have talked about Keith Abney is very promising. And then so far it's been Javen Robinson coming in from Washington State who's really taken over that other corner role. And you still have guys like LaTerrence Welsh who can contribute, Montana Warren, there are just a lot of quality depth. Rodney Bimage has been a good player so far. So like, it just makes me wonder, how good can this ASU defense actually be? Because if you look at the full season numbers of ASU defense last year, which I'm pulling up now, or starting to pull up now on YouTube for the YouTube listeners. Let's find the button I was looking for here. Okay. Screen share. And here we are. So this takes you to the just raw total totals of last year. So it shows ASU ranking very low, right? It had 31.8 points allowed per game is bad, obviously. Surprised that there were a decent chunk of Power Five. Yeah, I'll say Power Five teams in there. You got Baylor, Cal, Virginia. Coach Prime and the Colorado Buffaloes having a meaningfully worse defense than ASU last year, and USC, my word, Stanford, so that you had some pretty bad teams down there. But when you look at ASU's, it's their stats from last year. Hold on. I'm going to go by their game-by-game defensive performances because that tells a different story. And I think that if ASU defense is to be top half of the Big 12, which I think is realistic, I think it's possible. It's not a crazy unrealistic expectation. You just look at this. So Southern Utah, I'm still wondering what to think of that game, to be honest. There was a so ASU was up 21-7 at half, and it felt fairly, a not great performance against an FCS team, but one that would get the job done, right? An underwhelmingly sufficient performance in the first half of that game. Then the freaking Haboob rolls in, and ASU can't do anything. It just looked like they were so unmotivated after halftime, and I kind of don't blame them because I was at that game and it was like a 3-hour halftime. It was a very strange experience. Me and a few friends just literally wandered around the stadium. There was no one there. The crowd that was there at the end, it was just so weird. And so they got one touchdown drive, and apparently they scored on a Oh, that's right. They scored on a blocked punt. Okay. So that made it much closer than it should have been. So that's not even okay. So basically ASU gave up 2 touchdown drives to Southern Utah last year, which isn't great. You probably would want to hold them to 10 points or fewer, but whatever. So that's a good enough performance, right? The second game, they gave up 27 points to Oklahoma State. Not a horrible defensive outing, but also not great. 29-0 looks way worse than you think because again, ASU's quarterbacks, the three of them that played in that game, yeah, jeez, 5 interceptions and 8 turnovers. But almost all of those turnover drives were field goals. And so you could see last year that the ASU defense really did have some good games, 24-21 to Cal. It's not a bad game. The Colorado game, tough ending, but they kept him in check for a good portion of the game with up until oh my gosh, it was a coverage bust up until that coverage bust. And then Washington and UCLA, those are the games you point to where you're like, hey, like this is what this defense can be. Now, the Washington game just continues to be mystifying. There's reports that the team Washington, that is, had the flu, that Penix maybe had like a chest injury or something like that. So there are some caveats there, but this is still a team that played in the national championship game, held Washington, their best rush in that game, their best yardage for anyone in that game of a UW rusher was 13 yards by Will Nixon. That's it. They kind of held Odunze in check. Like it was, again, one of the weirdest games I've ever seen. It just, not even as an ASU perspective, like just as a college football fan, a team as bad as ASU probably should have won that game. So all I can say with that game is they picked off Penix twice. There were some other turnovers they got. Like this game against UW last year, the 15-7 loss, a game where they held UW to 9 points offensively, which is, again, just ridiculous. That game is the shining star if you think that ASU defense can be a top half of the Big 12 defense next year. And then you have the UCLA game. The caveat in that one is that I need to check this to me. Yeah, they were down to their third string quarterback. Dante Moore already wasn't playing. I'm forgetting. It's Ethan Garbers wasn't playing. So now you're down to third string Colin Schlee, and it just didn't look that great, even though UCLA was able to gain some yards on the ground, but ASU did have a few fourth down stops in there. They did what they need to do. And you know what? If you hold a team to 7 points, there's no apologizing about it. So, especially with just a significantly better team last year in UCLA. Then, now you look at the rest of the schedule from last year, and it's not that good. So you give up 27 points to Wazoo. That was an interesting game because most of those came in the first half from Wazoo. And so, you could say, oh, well, they had a bad first half and they still won and they shut them down in the second half, So there's some positive encouragement from there. And then these 3 games at Utah, 55-3 loss, home at Oregon, 49-13, home against Arizona, 59-23. Like it just, the wheels fell off. I think the last 2 games can be explained. It's just a mix of talent on the other side, and clearly ASU's depth was just not, defensive depth just wasn't there by the end. And when you factor in like it's talented offense in Oregon, right? NFL running back, NFL quarterback, NFL wide receiver in Troy Franklin. Then there's probably another guy who's going to be NFL receiver, and Tez Johnson was on that team. And multiple NFL offensive linemen, right? Like that team was an awesome team last year, a playoff caliber team, and they just kicked our ass. Like there's no way around it. But maybe if ASU's defense wasn't quite as injured, ASU loses that game like 38 to 38-13. Let's just keep it at that. Or maybe they lose 49-13, but not in the quite as, I think Oregon scored like 5 touchdowns in the first half. It was just gross. So I don't know. And then you can kind of say the same thing for Arizona. The Utah game, I don't quite put in that category because for one, it was Bryson Barnes throwing the ball, and that Utah offense really had a lot of struggles last year. So that was almost an outlier in the sense of the Washington game was an outlier. And I really blame a lot of the defensive results on that, honestly, on the ASU offense and Jacob Conover, who, if it's pretty, when you have 3 games where someone did not at least throw for 100 yards and your name's on there twice, that's tough. That is tough. There's no way around it. But I just kind of throw that game out. I think there's probably a lot of ASU players in that game. We're like, hey, we're probably going to lose anyway. During the game, you were down to your 4th string quarterback. It was just a disaster. It was a disaster. So I don't even know what to make of it. All of this is to say that I think it is very realistic, or I'm sorry, not very realistic. I think it is very much within the realm of possibility that ASU can be a top half defense if it just does have more depth, right? So that's not even if they have more depth. No, they have more depth. That has been reported. Anyone who's gone to practice has come back saying this team has a good defense and they have multiple levels to it. Chris Cartman had a tweet talking about ASU's roster as a whole last night. I thought he framed it pretty fun. I'm not going to share it on the screen. But it was basically just saying like the depth is much better on this team. And so to me, it's depth, Brian Ward coming back as defensive coordinator, and also playing fewer awesome offenses. ASU will run into a few awesome offenses this year in the Big 12. They will. But you're not playing USC with Caleb Williams. That's right there. That's another one. Colorado, you don't play Colorado this year. So that's another NFL quarterback you're not playing. Washington, you're not playing Michael Penix. And even if ASU defense has been incredible against Michael Penix, weirdly. Host Washington State, you're not playing Cam Ward. At Utah, okay, you're going to play Utah again, and they'll have a better offense this year. So there's a chance Utah kills you. You don't play against the offensive mind of Chip Kelly. I don't know, you do play against Fafita, and you do play, and then you don't play against Bo Nix. So 3 first-round quarterbacks you're not playing from last year in Penix, Nix, and Caleb Williams. So that's 1/4 of your schedule last year was against top 12 NFL quarterbacks. That's kind of crazy. And then you played Cam Ward and Shedeur Sanders last year, 2 guys who have the chance to be first-round picks, and both of them, they will be top 3-round picks. I don't see there's any way that Shedeur Sanders goes past the 3rd round. And Cam Ward, I would expect to be a first-round quarterback or somewhere in the 2nd round. That's 2 other guys, right? Okay, you're going to play Fafita. You're going to play Cam Rising. You're going to play. There's probably someone that pops up that's really good that we don't know about. I'm thinking of the schedule off the top of my head. BYU, no. Central Florida could have an awesome offense. So there are some teams, but it's not the grind, just the game in and game out of the Pac-12. And heck, Texas State you play this year. That's going to be a really difficult road challenge. So there are good offenses that you'll play this year in the Big 12, but not like last year in the Pac-12. You will not be in that position. There's no way. You can write it down. There is no way ASU will face off against 3 first-round quarterbacks this year. No chance. None. And when I mean first-round quarterbacks, I'm talking about first round that upcoming season. Not, you play Avery Johnson at Kansas State, and he ends up being a first-round pick later on. a few years from now. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about the 2025 NFL draft first round quarterbacks. You played 3 of them last year. 3. 5 in the next 2 drafts if I add in Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward. So that's half your schedule against 100% future NFL quarterbacks. Not like they might make the NFL. No, going to be in the NFL. So some of the defensive improvement, I think, is just going to be not playing Bo Nix, not playing Caleb Williams, not playing Michael Penix, weirdly enough, even though you had a great defensive game that day. And I mentioned it, the continuity with Brian Ward. He is a good defensive coordinator. If you were an ASU fan who paid attention last year, you are psyched about getting Brian Ward back. He kept you in games. I mean, the offense at times last year was an absolute disaster. So, and I want to show, we showed the overall stats of ASU. Those tell half the story. Now, it's not like ASU is killing it or killed it rather in the advanced metrics sphere of statistics, right? Like they're not like, oh, actually ASU had the 5th best defense last year in the country based on advanced metrics. That's not true. So this is last year. However, the rankings work on college football graphs, apparently Oregon was the best team in the league in the college football last year. Okay. I mean, I get it. Margin of victory factors into a lot of this, but okay. Anyway, let's go to defense. So this is overall rushing defense, drop back, early downs. Just go to rank them. Notre Dame was number 1. Makes sense. UCLA, all the teams up here very much make sense. ASU is down quite a bit. I'm not going to pretend that it's, here it is. Yeah. 94th. Now that's not good. Last year's 94th is not good, but that's a lot better than you might think. And then when you factor in that the last 4 games last year, I just don't know if those results are going to happen again. So you might just be able to take out those, the 55-3 to Utah, the 59er to Arizona, the 50 points to Oregon. Like maybe only one of those types of results happens this upcoming year. And then it just looks a lot different. So, and look, you're in the mix, right? BYU's right here. Kansas, that's Kansas's defense is down here from last year. UCF was considered to have a worse defense. Colorado, right? Cincinnati. There are some Big 12 teams in the mix. Baylor, second to last in defensive EPA. So sure, ASU's defense, like it was below average statistically last year, and it wasn't good. I'm not trying to say that ASU's defense was good last year, but when you're 94th, you're mixed in with a lot of other, below average teams, but they were significant. Like they were clearly better than a few others. So my point with this is there's some meat on the bone with ASU's defense. I talked about Jeff Clark, the transferred defensive tackle in from Louisville, because we got another defensive end in from Cincinnati, and I almost screw up those schools so often just because the color schemes are almost identical, and they're both on the Ohio River. So anyway, Jeff Clark comes in from Louisville. Watley comes in from Cincinnati. You get other defensive line transfers that have reportedly played well. Pick up a guy like Zach Swanson in the spring. So all of that is just, I think it's very possible for ASU's defense to be top eight in the Big 12. Possible, right? I don't think it's 100%, or maybe it's even more unlikely than it is likely, but it is absolutely a possibility. And I want to show one other thing. So this is the offense now. So overall offense, who had the best last year? Let's see. In this Iowa. So now they have it at the bottom. Well, look at that. ASU was the fourth worst offense in the league based off of the CFB graphs, advanced statistics. And they looked the part of the fourth worst offense last year, right? Like they really did. And look, who's the worst offense? It's Iowa. They also very much looked the part of that, you know? So it's while, again, it's still statistics and it's not 100% guarantee of what happened. It does kind of paint a picture of like it just matches up to the eye test a lot of times. And the eye test told you last year, ASU's defense, while not great, was pretty good was solid game to game, and then had a few cluster bad performances that threw off the numbers. And I wish it would have been interesting to look at the defensive overall rankings at Halloween of last year, because I think ASU would have been really high. Or not really high, but they would have been like slightly above average. And then you get into the November of last year and it all falls apart. And that's why they played. It still matters just as much, right? Each game matters the same. So it paints the picture that your eye test kind of saw on the field. And I want to add one more thing as to why ASU's defense could be better, and it's really about the offense. So, in overall, ASU had the fourth worst offense in the country based on college football graphs. Per dropback, they were second to last, ahead of only Navy, who doesn't drop back that often. Again, with the eye test, this makes sense. You had a game started by Jacob Conover. You had a game where you were shut out and had a bunch of turnovers against Fresno State. So you had the game against Washington, the offense wasn't great. And a lot of that comes back to the weak offensive line and how injured it was and all that. So having just a more competent offensive line and a more competent offense obviously will help out the defense. And I think ASU really just needs to lean into an identity of, we have great running backs, right? I believe there are 5 running backs who could play for multiple series, and I'm totally fine with, right? Scadaboo, obviously, McCaskill. When you have Sean Aguano comparing him to Rachaad White, I'm listening, okay? And McCaskill was awesome at Houston 2 years ago. He has the athleticism to back it up. Love it. Carlos Brooks, solid, really good player. When he was healthy last year, he was a big part of the game. Rayleigh Brown, just incredible athlete, 5-star, hasn't really done much at camp, but who knows really what to read into that. And then Kyson Brown, who's been very kind of a star, an underrated star of camp, I would say. Levitt hooked up with him for like a 40-yard touchdown pass on a wheel route at the Camp Tontozona scrimmage. And he's just been a consistent playmaker. And then Jason Brown, 4-star coming in. You probably won't see too much of him this year just due to the depth. But anyway, you have the running backs. Dillingham can scheme up run plays. The running wasn't a complete disaster for ASU. In fact, let's see what it was per rush last year. So it's down there, but I need to find them real quick because don't want this dead air. Here we go. They were 71st in rushing offense, which is about average. And again, that was with, at some points in the year, like a non-existent passing game, no passing threat, and no rushing quarterback threat either, right? And that's a thing that both Levitt and Sims bring, is that they can run. They are good athletes. Sims is a better athlete than Levitt, but Levitt's I've said since I went to the spring game, like that was the thing that stuck out to me the most, is he actually can really pull away from guys that more so than you might think. And that could be really big for this team because, as we've seen through camp, The quarterback battle seems to be going as about everyone expected. It's from a fan's perspective, I wish Levitt was pulling away more than he is, but it also appears that he is the clear leader. I mean, you can just go to Chris Cartman's Twitter page, sundevilsource.com, and he's been saying basically doing everything up to the line of actually reporting that ASU has named Sam Levitt as the starter. He's basically saying it's going to be Sam Levitt. So we basically know that now. And with Levitt, like he's shown flashes. He's apparently, Chris had a tweet that he has thrown fewer Jeopardy balls than people might expect from a redshirt freshman. So, and whereas Sims, like the turnover issue has followed him here to ASU camp. He threw 2 picks in the Camp T scrimmage. He had he's had picks throughout camp. And unfortunately, that's just an issue for him. So looks like Levitt will be the starter, but he's not like running away and hiding in this competition, right? He's just taking control and not screwing up. And that's a little bit of a, I'd say he's done more than that, but he hasn't like, wow, he's like, wow, Sam Levitt's killing everyone at practice. Not that, but he's doing well enough and he appears to be the clear starter. With him as the starter, you just need to, again, he's played very little college football. You need to have a running and defensive mentality, at least early on this year, because you don't want it to fall on Levitt to make every play throughout a game. That's going to be a recipe for disaster. And I don't think the coaching staff wants to do that or anything. So leaning on the run game, leaning on the interior of the offensive line that is weirdly a solid part of the team. I don't want to call it like a strength because that implies too much, but it's a solid unit. I would put it that way. And, you lean on the running backs, you lean on tight ends blocking. I mean, apparently Shimon Mateer has just been an absolute beast at camp, pancaking dudes. And then Marqueston Douglas from Florida State is just an enormous person, absolutely enormous. So you have those 2 guys on the bookends of the line of scrimmage, and you can really get going with the run game, especially when you add in the legs of Levitt and even legs of Sims in some cases as well. There was no quarterback run threat last year. None. Rashada was not a runner. Bourguet was a decent runner for his ability, but he's not, no defensive coordinators like, oh, we got to stop Bourguet's rushing. Pine could have been a runner. We barely saw him. It just didn't work out. And then Conover, not really. So that adds another element to it. And I think just having a more ball control mindset, which I think Dillingham wanted to do last year, there was everything fell apart from a personnel perspective so quickly. And that just threw everything off. I do wonder what would have happened. I really wonder what would have happened if some of the offensive linemen had stayed healthier early on. Do you beat Colorado? Do you beat Cal? And all of a sudden people just kind of have a different look at this team. Had they gone 5-7 last year, ultimately it doesn't really matter because it's this year and that was last year, but I kind of think about that sometimes. So anyway, I think with the second year of Brian Ward's 4-2-5, the personnel pieces that you have and the multiple looks that you can use with those guys, I just think the ASU defense is set up for success on that alone. And then you add in a better offense to complement the defense. So continuity, better offense to complement the defense, weaker offensive competition. And I don't even really mean that as a jab on the Big 12. It's just, again, ASU faced 3 first-round quarterbacks last year and 2 more quarterbacks who will almost certainly be top 3 round picks in this upcoming draft. So 5 highly drafted quarterbacks. And yes, this is some projection with Sanders and Ward, but I'm not going out on a limb here. 5 highly drafted NFL quarterbacks is who ASU played last year. So that's 5 of their 7 games. And I just think all of that is just really going to help ASU. I don't think they're going to allow like sub 20 points per game. I think they can be in like the 24 points per game range though. And that's not, amazing, but that's pretty good. And that'll keep you in games, like one of the themes of this summer on this show with Colton and I has been ASU's defense is a floor raiser. It is not something that they're not going to go into Manhattan, Kansas and beat Kansas State because they held them to 10 points or something like that. That's not happening. But they could go into Cincinnati and hold them to 17 points. And then maybe you win 20-17 in a game where your offense didn't actually play that well. You can steal a game or two because of this defense. And you know what? Now that I'm wrapping this up, there's one more thing. ASU's defense forced very little turnovers last year. And some of that was just the bounce of the ball. I remember vividly Dee Ford had a chance to pick off Caleb Williams in the USC game, and it just bounced off his chest, right? So it's not like some incredible play that he had to make, right? So last year, ASU had 5 total interceptions. 5. A lot of those came in one game. Shamari Simmons had one. Trey Brown had one. Roe Torrance, Ed Woods each had one. And Keith Abney. Oh, wait, no. Was it Keith? Yes, it was Keith Abney had one. So that's good that he already has one of those under his belt. Let me look up turnover differential. I don't know if I can find that. Okay. We'll try to fumble recovered because forced fumble is irrelevant. So Shamari Simmons had 2 fumbles recovered. Tate Romney and CJ Fight. So that's 9 defensive turnovers. Less than 1 defensive turnover per game forced by ASU. I don't know, that just seems like that's not going to happen. I think there's going to be some regression there. So when you add just turnover regression, then we're really starting to cook. Defensively. So, you got the edges, Prince Dorba and Clayton Smith pressuring the quarterback. Elijah O'Neal has been really good at camp. Jamon Tapp comes in. There's some talent there. It's not a complete wasteland in the back defensively. And I really think that Brian Ward is going to use the depth, use the talent, use the guys coming in, use some of the experienced guys, and just really get to work this year. And again, the offense will help out with that just by not. I find it hard to believe that ASU's offense will be as bad as it was last year. And so therefore the defense will be better because they won't be put in such bad positions. So really excited about watching the ASU defense. And, here's some news I'll get to actually. It's from 720 Sports on Twitter. And it's that Wyoming running back Harrison Whaley will not play in game 1 due to a knee injury on his right knee. So that's good news for ASU. This guy ran for 950 yards and 5 touchdowns. He had a good game against Texas last year. And then Wyoming will also lose defensive tackle Lucas Samsula to a torn Achilles. So a defensive tackle and then their best running back will not play in week 1 almost certainly. ASU should beat Wyoming even if those guys did play, but as we know, it is not a guarantee at all. So it's very good that those guys, just from a strictly competitive perspective, obviously it's not good that they're injured, but for an ASU perspective, that is good news that those guys aren't playing. It is. And so, that should help out the defense. Maybe you just give up like 10 points and you would have otherwise given up 17 with Whaley playing, and all of a sudden you don't. And there you go. So some of this is luck. Like a lot of times you see this in the NFL where one team catches a bunch of backup quarterbacks just however the schedule shakes out, right? Sometimes that happens in college football, right? A lot of teams got that last year when they played ASU a lot of times. And that obviously matters. So again, quarterback injuries will happen. And when they do, it would be a good, stroke of luck that they happen to fall on ASU schedule when they're injured, right? Like that's just how it goes. They make depth charts for a reason, because not every player is of equal quality. So getting a backup quarterback would help the cause. It just would. So there are some other things that could factor in, but ultimately, I think it's just going to be improved talent and depth, continuity with Ward, not facing as much NFL quarterbacks, and maybe getting some turnover. I don't even want to say luck, turnover regular luck, I guess. Kind of get back to the mean of what the turnovers would be. So, especially with the way that he calls defense, it's not like it's a, give them 5 yards on every play and make them, go down the field on us like we see in the NFL. This is much more of a defensive defense, or aggressive defense that brings extra guys to the quarterback, does exotic stuff, and that should generate more turnovers. But ultimately, you got to get your hands on the ball for sure. So that's kind of my thoughts on the defense. I just, there's not really much to say about the quarterback competition at this point. Again, Levitt's doing well enough, and Sims is behind him. I do want to point out that Bourguet also threw 2 touchdowns in the Camptown zone of scrimmage. So I think that is definitely something to keep stock of. My guy Ralph Amston wants Bourguet to start. I can't say I agree, but I get where he's coming from. And I think there is a reality where a Trent Bourguet led team gets to 6-6, but it doesn't feel like it's gonna. I feel like with Bourguet, it's more about like, do you bring him in as the backup or do you go with Jeff Sims? I don't know. Probably kind of depends on the game and the circumstances or whatever, but it does feel that he's a little bit more on the outside looking in. And some of it might be is just like Marcus Arroyo and Dillingham. Like he does have a good bit of college film out there, and some of it's good, but some of it shows its limitations as well. So I think that it'll just end up being Levitt, and I think that's kind of what you want. I wish he would kind of have grabbed it a little more firmly, but I'm not, I haven't gone to any games or anything like that, or practices or scrimmages. So like, I'm just basing my opinions off what I've seen from Twitter and stuff like that. So, there's a scrimmage on Saturday on the 17th. Dillingham and Arroyo said they felt like they will have more clarity after that. And when you couple those statements with Cartman basically tweeting out that it's going to be Levitt again, this, I think it's almost certainly going to be him. So that's kind of wraps up the quarterback competition. Jeff Sims made it close for a little bit, it seems, but it looks like Levitt's pulling away, and that's probably best. And hopefully, you just kind of ease him in at the Wyoming game. So, yeah. All right. Kind of a blast from the past here from ASU football. Will Sutton was named to the Sun Devil Hall of Fame earlier this week. Unfortunately, for me specifically, Will Sutton winning back-to-back Pac-12 Defensive Player of the Year awards at defensive tackle, that came my junior and senior year of high school. So I did not have any overlap at all. I know that he's a good player. It's kind of unfortunate his NFL career didn't take off quite as much, because, I mean, that would help with his name recognition and stuff like that. But it is what it is. And I saw some highlights of his. The interception against Utah on the road in Salt Lake City in 2013. That's a really, really big play. ASU only led by 1 point at that point in the game. Defensive tackle to come down with a pick in that moment is big. Obviously, you look at his stats, 13 sacks in 2012, only 4 sacks in 2013, but he was a defensive tackle at that point, not a defensive lineman. So that changes some stuff. 23 and a half tackles for loss. That includes the sacks, I believe, in his junior year is ridiculous. 5 passes defensed, 3 forced fumbles. My word. My word. And then the next year, 48 tackles, 13 and a half tackles for loss, 4 sacks on a 2013 team. I think the 2013 ASU team is probably the best team. I wasn't around for the 07 team, but it's probably the best team since the Rose Bowl team. So really, really glad that he made the ASU Hall of Fame. And he was a big reason why those early Todd Graham teams were kind of able to get off the ground and have some real success. Think of how great back-to-back 10-win seasons would be now, right? So just good to see him get recognized. I also saw this come across social media today, and it was an unfortunate news. Former ASU defensive back Josh Golden passed away earlier this month at age 42. Again, this is another guy I don't really have a history with, but just wanted to say rest in peace to Josh Golden, former Sun Devil. And I think that's about it for this show. I'm glad that things are starting to come together with football, and the reports of having good depth are a good thing to see. So hopefully it shows up on Saturdays. All right. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching on YouTube. Please like and subscribe on YouTube, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. Follow the College Huddle on Twitter. Go to thecollegehuddle.com, and you get some great stuff there if you're a college football fan. So yeah. Well, anyway, thank you for watching. We are so close to the start of the season. It's kind of scary. And Georgia Tech and FSU play next Saturday out in the Emerald Isle. So that'll be fun to watch too. But I'm excited. Season's getting close, and we here at the Stomp the Bus show will give you weekly content about what we think about ASU. So please keep following, keep supporting. Our little brand here is up to 185 Twitter followers, which is a lot more than it started with, and about 45 YouTube subscribers, which is not breaking the bank, but it's better than it was, right? So, and hey, that's what all that we're hoping for is for ASU football to be better this year than it was last year. So I'll tie it in there. You know what? I'll say, please like and subscribe once again, rate and review on your podcast platform of choice. And as always, go Sun Devils.